Barry, Robin, and Maurice from family Gibb were the loudest kids on the block. These three brothers spent every day singing at full volume, whether in their living room or at talent shows, driving their neighbors crazy. The Gibb brothers made a lot of noise and tested everyone's patience. Even their parents had trouble keeping up with their constant singing and screaming until they became the masterminds behind some of the most iconic songs of the 70s. Unlikely, right? Well, this is the untold story of the Bee Gees. Barry, Robin, and Maurice Gibb were born on the Isle of Man, but their family soon moved to Manchester, England. From a young age, the three brothers were inseparable. Music became their shared obsession. Barry, the oldest, naturally stepped into the role of leader, while twins Robin and Maurice followed his lead. They would spend hours in their living room, singing together, practicing harmonies, and experimenting with melodies. The Gibb brothers' early performances were far from glamorous. In fact, their first public appearance was in a local theater where they mimed to records because they couldn't afford a backing band. At one point, they even earned a reputation as troublemakers, not for bad behavior, but for their relentless determination to perform anywhere they could. When they weren't practicing, they were pestering local shop owners and venues, begging for a chance to sing. But then, in 1958, the Gibb family made a major move to Australia, settling in Brisbane. This change gave the brothers a fresh start and new opportunities. In Australia, they formed their first official band, the Rattlesnakes, which later evolved into Wee Johnny Hayes and the Blue Cats. While these early efforts were modest, they were laying the groundwork for something much bigger. As teenagers, the brothers started calling themselves the Bee Gees, a name derived from their initials. They began writing their own songs and performing on television shows in Australia. One of their first big breaks came when their song Spicks and Specks became a surprise hit in 1966, giving them their first taste of fame. Realizing they had outgrown the Australian music scene, the brothers decided to return to England in 1967, a bold move that marked the beginning of their true rise to stardom. But then, they got signed by legendary producer Robert Stigwood, who saw their potential and promised to help shape their career. These early years were defined by experimentation, struggle, and persistence. The boys who once annoyed their neighbors were now building the skills and confidence that would soon take the world by storm. Stigwood recognized the Bee Gees' potential and immediately got to work, helping them refine their sound and connect with audiences. Under his guidance, the brothers began recording songs that would resonate far beyond the UK. Their breakthrough came in 1967 with the release of New York Mining Disaster, 1941. The song was haunting and unique, with a mysterious title that caught listeners' attention. Many initially thought it was a new Beatles song, which only added to its popularity. This single climbed the charts, introducing the Bee Gees as a serious act. Soon after, the hits kept coming. Songs like Massachusetts and To Love Somebody showcased their ability to craft deeply emotional and melodic music. Massachusetts topped charts worldwide, cementing their place in the pop scene. However, their success didn't come without challenges. Critics often compared them to the Beatles, and the pressure to produce more hits was immense. The brothers also dealt with internal conflicts as their individual personalities began to clash. But through it all, they stayed committed to their shared dream of creating timeless music. By the late 1960s, the Bee Gees were no longer just hopeful kids. They were international stars on the brink of a new chapter, one that would redefine their careers forever. By the early 1970s, the Bee Gees had established themselves as a successful pop act, but something was missing. Their music were hits, but the music industry was evolving, and the brothers risked being left behind. This was a critical moment. They could stick with the familiar, or they could take a bold dive into the unknown. But then, everything changed. The turning point came when the Bee Gees relocated to Miami in 1975. It was there, in the heat and energy of Florida, that they found their new sound. Producer Arif Mardin suggested they lean into their falsetto harmonies and funkier rhythms, pushing them in a direction that would define their career. The result was the album Main Course, featuring hits like Jive Talkin'. It was fresh, exciting, and unlike anything they had done before. The gamble paid off. Audiences loved this new disco-inspired sound, but the brothers didn't stop there. They continued to innovate, blending dance beats with soulful lyrics. Their next album, Children of the World, included the massive hit You Should Be Dancing, which solidified their status as pioneers of the ongoing disco movement. However, their true rise to superstardom came in 1977 with the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. The Bee Gees wrote and performed several tracks for the film, including Stayin' Alive, Night Fever, and How Deep Is Your Love. The album became a cultural phenomenon, selling millions of copies and topping the charts worldwide. Suddenly, the Bee Gees weren't just popular, they were the face of an entire era. Their success was staggering. For a period in 1978, they held the top spots on the Billboard charts simultaneously, a fact rarely matched in music history. But their fame came at a cost. Critics began to turn against them, accusing the Bee Gees of oversaturating the market. Some even mocked their falsetto-heavy sound. Still, the 70s belonged to the Bee Gees. They had transformed from pop balladeers into global superstars, creating a legacy that would define the disco era in music history forever. By the late 1970s, the Bee Gees were at the top of the music world, but their success came with big problems. The disco hype, which had made them famous, was starting to fall apart. People were getting tired of disco. By 1979, many music fans and critics began to call it cheesy and overplayed. Unfortunately, since the Bee Gees were the biggest stars of the genre, they became the main target of the backlash. It got so bad that events like Disco Demolition Night, where people burned disco records in a stadium, made it clear that the world was moving on, and the Bee Gees were caught in the middle of it. But the disco backlash wasn't their only issue. The pressure of fame was getting to them. Barry was seen as the leader, which sometimes caused fights with Robin, who wanted more say in their music. Maurice also struggled during this time, dealing with alcohol problems, which made things even harder for the group. When the 1980s came, the Bee Gees tried to leave disco behind and create a new sound, but it wasn't easy. Radio stations didn't want to play their music anymore, seeing them as disco singers. Still, the brothers didn't give up. They turned to writing songs for other artists, creating hits for Diana Ross, Barbra Streisand, and others. Even though they weren't dominating the charts as performers, they stayed relevant in the music world. It wasn't an easy time for the Bee Gees, but their passion for music kept them going. They showed the world that they were more than just a disco act. They were artists who could adapt and keep creating. The Bee Gees' story continues to resonate, but today only one brother remains. Barry Gibb, the eldest of the three, is the last surviving member of the group. Maurice tragically passed away in 2003 due to complications from surgery, and Robin died in 2012 after battling cancer. Despite the losses, Barry has carried the legacy of the Bee Gees forward, keeping their music and story alive for fans old and new. In recent years, Barry has stayed active in the music world. He has performed in tribute concerts, released solo albums, and even collaborated with other artists. In 2021, he released Greenfields, the Gibb Brothers Songbook, Volume 1, a reimagining of Bee Gees classics with country music stars like Dolly Parton and Keith Urban. The album was both a commercial success and a touching homage to his brothers. Barry has also taken part in preserving the Bee Gees' history. He contributed to the 2020 HBO documentary, The Bee Gees, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart?, which explored the group's rise, challenges, and legacy. The documentary brought a new generation of fans into the fold and getting appreciation for their contributions to music. Outside of music, Barry has embraced a quieter life, splitting his time between his homes in England and Miami. He often reflects on the group's journey, sharing stories about his brothers and the music they created together. Despite the heartbreak of losing Robin and Maurice, Barry continues to honor their memory through his performances and interviews. Meanwhile, the Bee Gees' music remains as influential as ever. Their songs are featured in movies, TV shows, and commercials, ensuring their legacy endures. Barry's commitment to celebrating their story ensures that the Bee Gees will always have a special place in music history.